Hello and welcome to Reviews. As always, I'm Plume Noir, and you may tell by the desk here, maybe the humming you hear, I'm working a double today, so I am actually at the office. Surprise, surprise. So I went down into the lab here, and because I wanted to talk about Doomsday Clock. It's kind of weird. It's a black and white cover, but on this table, if it wasn't for my hand, it kind of looks like it's filmed in black and white, doesn't it? Anyway, Doomsday Clock. This is issue number 10. Of course, Geoff Johns, Gary Frank, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The bi-monthly schedule of this book is killing it. And it feels like it's been longer than 2 months. I haven't gone back to my other video for issue number 9, but it feels like it's been longer than 2 months. But anyway, as you know, I think I've talked about this in other videos. We had, Rebirth. Geoff Johns, wrote Rebirth, DC Rebirth. Kind of an undoing of the New 52, to make older DC fans happy, to bring things back together. Kind of a DC's make good. And then they started putting out bits of the story, like the Batman Flash crossover, the Button, what was going on with Superman and Mr. Oz. And it was all leading up to this big story, the big secret of the DC universe. I mean, there were still some other secrets, the Three Jokers, for example, but it all seemed like there was a concentrated effort from, the higher-ups at DC when, Geoff Johns was creative director or whatever his title was, to come up with this big overarching story and really change DC, the DC universe. And I think the political winds at DC have shifted, and this book is not going to have as much power as it was going to. And I don't know if the delays have been caused by rewrites or Gary Frank's art, which is beautiful. This book is beautiful. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The art in this book is great. But this series will read fantastic in trade. I'm just going to say that. I can already tell when issue 12 comes out, because this series has been going on for 7 years now? It feels that way, but kidding aside, it's been going on for well over a year, and when issue 12 finally comes out, I'm going to sit down and read it, in one sitting, just to see how it holds up. So let's start off with this cover, and you're probably thinking, oh, who is this? Well, it's Nathaniel Dusk. Nathaniel Dusk, if you've been reading the series, they've been doing kind of like the Black Freighter in the Watchmen. They've been weaving the Black Freighter comic through the Watchmen as kind of an allegory to what was going on in the story. Because obviously in Watchmen, there were no superheroes. Basically, pirate fiction was the superheroes in that universe. Yeah, they had costumed adventurers like in the 60s and then again in the 80s. But the first real superhero in their world was, of course, Dr. Manhattan. He was the only one with powers. But in our universe, and when I say in our universe, Earth Prime, where we all live, Nathaniel Dusk was actually a comic that DC put out in the 80s. I never read it myself. I remember seeing his entry in, I think it might have been the very first Who's Who in the DC Universe, the very first edition they did. I had all those issues. I loved them, in the pre-internet days. And I should really go back and find those issues because I love film noir. In fact, In a Lonely Place is one of my all-time favorite movies. So look it up sometime. Trust me, Humphrey Bogart, Gloria Graham, good movie. But anyway, in the DC Universe, Nathaniel Dusk is a hard-boiled detective. But in the DC Universe, it's actually a series of movies. Nathaniel Dusk is a character, think like, Sam Spade, who is portrayed by Carver Coleman. And we've been seeing bits of his story, throughout Doomsday Clock. kind of like I said, how Black Freighter weaves through. Well, this one, it's really driven home. 5 minutes, haven't even opened up the book. So this book is really about Carver and Dr. Manhattan. Um, and you may think, well, wait, I'm here for Superman, all the other heroes. They just left him off on Mars. Dr. Manhattan flattened them. Well, you see like a quick second of them, but that's not the meat of the story. Um, so it starts off with a scene being portrayed. The character is, what's her name again? Is it not Gloria? Like I said, I didn't read the original comics. Oh yeah, Joyce. She's actually from the comic, from I can't talk, the Nathaniel Dusk comic. But this scene here is actually, they're filming the last Nathaniel Dusk movie. The issue is called Action. Bear that in mind. It's kind of important. So we find out how, he's not having a good day. Basically, it's June 8th. He he has to finish this movie tonight. And they're overshooting. He keeps screwing up his script. He's screwing up his lines. People think he's drinking or whatever. And we have Dr. Manhattan narrating, basically explaining what's going on. But what's really going on, when they finally finish shooting, like 6 hours later, finally wrap up the final Nathaniel Dusk movie, you find out that Carver Coleman is being blackmailed by his mom. And he told Hollywood how he was from I think Minnesota, and his mom and his dad thanked them. In fact, right here, Indiana, my parents in was that Merrillville, Indiana. This is for you, mom and dad. You find out later that he actually never knew his dad. He wasn't close with his mom because she threw him out because he was gay. So she is blackmailing him, being a star in Hollywood, at a time, this is actually 1954, not a good time to be gay, especially in Hollywood. And she's blackmailing him. And so he's been getting, he's got some kind of bad news anyway. Now, I gotta warn you as I go through this, there may be some blue dong. I'm just, it's going to be too hard for me to go through and censor it all because, Doc Matt is just naked throughout the book. So yeah, we do get scenes of the filming, and we get Dr. Manhattan's story. And, of course, we remember this scene from the original Watchmen, and, of course, the original scene on Mars, what's going on in Mars right now. Obviously, that must be Zatanna. Could be Black Canary, but she normally wears higher boots. So I'm guessing that's Zatanna. Could be just about anyone's gloves there, but they're still on Mars. But you notice they have the little force field thing effect. So he's not killing them. When he trounced them, it looks like he's putting a protective field around them so they have their personal oxygen. Let's try and get through this. And yeah, it's basically their story. When Carver comes to Hollywood, he's trying to find a job. He's homeless. He's living on the street. They're about to. The police are about to, basically kick his ass for being a vagrant. And a vagrant. That's when Dr. Manhattan arrives on their world. Now, it's really important because you find out he arrives on April 18th, what was it, 1934? They say it on here. April 14th keeps coming. April 14th. April 18th. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. I've been going since 6 a.m. here. April 18th is really important because the day Doc Manhattan arrives is the day Action Comics #1 came out. Now, granted, I know April 18th is not the real day that Action Comics came out. It's long been said, but it's been proven to be untrue. But it's kind of one of those urban legends. In fact, I think Brian on CBR, the only good part of CBR, his Urban Legends Revealed, actually covered that once. And that's why I know that's not true. So as typical John fashion, as he's kind of drifting through the timelines, the past, present, future, you know, he comes back to the present. You know, I see myself on Mars, or is that now? Hal Jordan tries to get the rest of the Corps, but Dr. Manhattan stops him and takes down anyone else that's still standing. I need you all incapacitated for reasons that will become clear. Now, he could just kick their asses, you know, even worse. But no, he's just restraining them. In fact, this is the logo I remember from the comics, seeing that in the Who's Who. So yeah, Carver Coleman ends up becoming a huge star. When he runs into Dr. Manhattan, when he first lands on Earth, or arrives on Earth, um, you know, Carver asks him, "Are you an angel?" And you get that kind of look. No. So they go to a diner, and they sit down. Dr. Manhattan explains why the waitress is not reacting to a giant naked blue man. And so yeah, it's April 18th, 1938. Again, supposedly the first issue of Action Comics. The first issue where Superman appears. So it coincides with his arrival with Superman's arrival. And Dr. Manhattan frustratedly, you know, realizes he's unable to look into the future. He needs something to focus on. So Carver becomes like his tether. And in a lot of ways, it's similar to how uh, the Sandman kept meeting up with Hob Grayling. Grayling, is that right? That doesn't seem right. With Hob, every year meets up with him, and that's what Doctor Manhattan does. You know, this man. It's like trying to see through a soap-covered window. It's April 18th, 1938. You know, it's April 18th, 1939, and so because of his seeing the future, he tells him about he's going to get the role. You were right, John. I got the part right alongside Gary Cooper. Can you believe it? It's called A Westerner. How did you? And back to the present. Having a hard time. I thought you were sent from heaven. My guardian angel, maybe. But if you're not an angel, are you God? And this was one of my fears about this book, was that, you know, the DC creation universe, you know, when Kronos looked out and he saw the hand gripping the universe, sometimes it's said to be Kronos' hand, sometimes it's a First Lantern hand, but it's always depicted as a blue hand holding the universe. And since, you know, Dr. Manhattan said in Watchmen he was going to go out and investigate other galaxies, maybe create life, there was a lot of fears. I was worried about this myself, that it was going to turn out that Dr. Manhattan created the DC universe. That's not the case. He ended up here and does not understand it. It doesn't work the way he's used to. He has trouble seeing the future. And here's where he tells him, in 8 months, you're going to get cast in a role that will change your life. And then he looks over reports of a mysterious New York, Metropolis, New York, a mysterious man who has lifted a car over his head. And it's April 18th, 1938. News of Superman travels quickly across America. The comic. And of course, you see the infamous cover here, you know, the aftermath where Superman smashes the car. The crowd, the car, Superman. They were never here. It's April 18th, 1938. The world has changed. So why is the world changing? Well, that's what Dr. Manhattan's trying to figure out. He talks about the many worlds interpretation in quantum physics, the multiple timelines. The heroes on Earth call it the multiverse, and the world was its center. The world was introduced to Superman. He was the first of the costume heroes, the first of many on this world. Notice that look of disgust on his face. And it's July 1940. An engineer named Alan Scott is on a train careening over a bridge. He grabs onto a Green Lantern, unaware of the power within. Now remember, in an earlier issue, Dr. Manhattan says that he pushed the lantern just a few inches out of Alan Scott's reach. So, what we see the rest of the JSA being founded, you know, the other members, and it's November 1940. I know we've been waiting for Superman. And so we have them around the table, first meeting. But if the Justice Society of America is going to work, I think we need him. Maybe his invitation got lost. Maybe he thinks he's too good for the rest of us. Now, remember, before Crisis, there was Superman 1 who was on, Superman 2 who was on Earth 2, Superman 1, our Superman. The way they changed the timeline comics, he was a founding member of the JSA. But when the two universes got folded over, Superman, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman were no longer founding members of the Justice Society. They all appeared later. In fact, Wonder Woman appeared right after Crisis in the new timeline. But in this timeline, we see that he was supposed to be a founding member. But then something changes. When Thunderbolt tells us Thunderbolt, say you, find Superman. And then it suddenly changes back. No pictures yet, Johnny. I'm still working on my costume. I think it's important we capture this moment. The entire team is here. They're not waiting for Superman. No one has heard of him. And Dr. Manhattan wonders, where is he? So we find that Superman's timeline is sliding. So again, we see the fortune. Now Carver's life is going very well. Now it's 1948, 10 years later. You see how successful he is. Everything you prophesied has happened. You've given me so much hope over the years. And now remember, it's 1948. Doc Manhattan asks, have you ever heard of Superman? Superman? No. So tell me, John, what's in store for the coming year? So he goes back to the Kent farm. And now in 1956, Superman is seen in Metropolis for the first time. And we see the Silver Age, because it's later now. We see the Kents find, young Kal-El. And then it's October 1986. And his arrival on Earth has shifted forward again. Now here is John Byrne's Man of Steel post-crisis origin. So as things are being, retconned, timelines change, the sliding timeline. We see the original Golden Age, the original Silver Age. Now here's his Bronze Age origin. It keeps moving up in time. His arrival changes again and again. So yeah, it keeps getting changed a little bit with each, retelling of his origin. And here, we see one of the newer ones. I want to be Clark Kent. I want to be your son. And, John says, I don't understand this universe. And so, yeah, we see here where, they die in this timeline, in 1949. But in this origin, in fact, this is pretty much right from the Man of Steel, this panel. It's October 1986. His parents are alive. But then, when Pa Kent does die, which was around the death of Superman, wasn't it? Or is it a little bit after? It was around that time. I believe I misinterpreted what this universe actually is. I look to the future, following Superman's trail of influence. How could one man affect so much, even 1,000 years from now? And that's when we see, of course, the Legion of Superheroes who are inspired by Superman. And, it's 2 against 1 anyway. So it's all connected to him. And yeah, Gary Frank's art in this book is fantastic. But here's where John decides he's going to affect the metaverse, which is really interesting. He no longer calls it a multiverse. He calls it a metaverse, where things are being affected by other things. It's fascinating. The multiverse doesn't affect Earth. Earth affects the multiverse. It goes the other way. Now, it's very similar to Geoff Johns' Blackest Night, where we find out that Earth was actually the center of the universe, not Oa. That's why all the stuff that happens on Earth, why it's so important, why it affects, the past and the future and other galaxies, and why humans are so different. It's because life originated on Earth. And that was one of the big secrets of the Guardians of the Universe. They didn't want anyone to know that, else they'll find the life entity. But here we also find out, where it's been talked about before, that Earth is the center of the multiverse. But here we find that Earth is not only just a center. What affects Earth affects the multiverse. Specifically, it affects, what happens to Superman affects the universe. So here is when John decides he's going to try and change the timeline a little bit. So when he moves the Green Lantern, Superman was never Superboy, so he never goes to the Legion of Superheroes. That never happens. The Justice Society never forms. And, long story short, I can't go too much farther, but that's where we get the New 52. So yeah, it was John's influence that created the New 52 just by pushing the lantern. And so you see, this is actually one of the only times this armor, the New 52 armor, has ever looked good. I hated this armor. I hated the idea of Superman in armor. It makes no sense, but this actually looks good. But that's when we have Wally, when he comes and sees him. Whatever you did, they'll stop you. I realize that the metaverse is not passive. Like an organism fighting to survive, there are aspects of it I've underestimated. An innate hope that fights back to the surface. So yeah, I gotta stop. Because this issue is so good. This is really good. You can read this one over and over, and you see what John is doing. Now, Geoff Johns is one of those writers, you either love him or you hate him. You either think he's really good or you think he's overrated. I happen to like him a lot. Although his Green Lantern, at the end was just like event. It never had any breathing room anymore. But otherwise, I overall really like his stuff. And this issue especially, I really think the naysayers for Geoff Johns are going to come around and say, okay, this is good. This is nuanced. And here's what we find out, that John has his falling down moment. The end of the movie, Falling Down. Again, another movie I love. It doesn't really quite fall into the neo-noir category, but villain and protagonist. But defense at the end, when he realizes, I'm the villain, Dr. Manhattan has a very similar thing, because he realizes he's a man of inaction. And you go back and look through Watchmen, there were a lot of things that happened that he could have stopped, but he didn't. Like the comedian shooting his, the pregnant woman who was pregnant with his child. He could have stopped that. He could have stopped the Ozymandias's plan. He could have turned him in. For the most part, John is a man of inaction. Superman is a man of action. Action Comics, maybe. April 18th, 1938. Anyway, there's a lot of lines here. You start finding a lot of nuances, and something just fired up over there. That's a nice thing. It's one of the lab equipment things, so I better not go too much longer. Hope it's not too loud. It really shouldn't be making that noise. I probably should check on that. But anyway, this is really good. And this series is going to read so much better, because now we have Dr. Manhattan realizing that he's the villain. And he was actually approaching this from more a scientific standpoint, trying to understand the universe. And that's when he made the little change that caused, Alan Scott to be killed and caused changes to the timeline. He hasn't been the one changing everything, causing all the other, sliding timelines. I hope you can hear me. I do apologize for this. But he did cause the New 52. He says outside influences have affected the metaverse. Who are those outside influences? Oh, I got ink on my hand. That's us. That's us. Or specifically the writers. He hasn't quite come out and said he knows he's a work of fiction, but he does know that there are outside forces affecting Earth, which affects the rest of the multiverse, and it centers on Superman. Now, you're probably wondering, well, okay, it's powering down. No, fans are going down now. Like I said, I'm in the lab. This is a lab environment. This should not be firing up like that. Um, so, yeah. What does Nathaniel Dusk have to do with this? What does Carver Coleman's story have to do with this? Well, Carver is his linchpin to the DC universe. We find out in the script from the last few pages of the last Nathaniel Dusk movie that it looks like the character is killed, but he actually isn't. And I think that's the foreshadowing of what's going to happen with Dr. Manhattan. It's going to look like he's actually killed or destroyed because remember, he can't see past his encounter with Superman. But I think that's just going to mean he's going to change. He's going to, maybe be powered down a little bit, but he's going to be still around. At 12 o'clock, like I said, I'm trying not to spoil too much. I'm trying to go into the details and the layers. And you see these past 9 issues leading up to this. You see where things are starting to come together. And they really come together on this. You really see what John's up to. And we still have 2 more issues left, which should be, about another 9-10 months for this series to finish? But anyway, good. 12 o'clock. 12 Doomsday o'clock. This is good. I know a lot of people think that the Watchmen should be just left alone, never addressed again. Before Watchmen, it had a couple good issues. For the most part, wasn't that good. But this is good. And I do like that black and white cover. It's so good. I love this book. It's so nice. It's so nice to actually read something good. And I was worried about this series. I was worried about where it was going. And to find out is actually going somewhere promising, that Geoff Johns is really showing off his writing chops, and Frank's art is fantastic. This is just a good book. I can't stop gushing about it. But that just means I have the final issue of X-23 still waiting. So that'll probably be tomorrow. Yay. But anyway, get this. When this comes out in trade paperback, if you haven't been following it, get it. I'm going to say that even without the ending, without issues 11 and 12 being out, I'm telling you, unless Geoff Johns really screws the pooch on the ending, this is a good book. And I could still, I've been talking 27 minutes, I could still keep going about things in this book. But I don't want to spoil too much. I don't want to keep going on, because when I read it the second time this evening, I read it last night, and I read it, while on break here, again, to go through and, make little mental notes here. I was noticing more and more things. So, good book. Good Geoff Johns. Awesome. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will be back tomorrow with the last issue of X-23. So, as always, thanks for watching.